CyberHub bunker and studio. You're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast Practitioner Brief. I hope you're ready for a really busy show and an interesting one nonetheless. A lot's going on in the world of cyber today. We're going to be talking about a whole lot of that, including some patches from Google and some tips by the NSA yesterday, as well as Russia, China, and a friend of the show's went on the Hill yesterday and testified for something that I think is arguably probably the most important thing we could be asking our government partners for. So we'll be talking about all of that and what that means for practitioners today. Thank you all for tuning in. CyberHubPodcast.com. You can find all the latest content there, including all of our slew of shows, CISO Talk, and a Friday conversation tomorrow with Eric Crone. We're going to be talking about cyber certifications. You don't want to miss it. You'll see the announcement come through with the time here shortly for that tomorrow as well. So make sure you tune in. Take 30 minutes tomorrow. Join us for a fun conversation, some trivia, and win some swag while you're at it. All right, let's grab our morning cup of joe. My infamous, famous, magnificently delicious, very invigorating double espresso. Coffee cup, cheers. Let's start with Google patching 14 different vulnerabilities with the release of Chrome 103. The most severe of the bugs was CVE 2022-2156, which is described as a critical severity use after free issue in base. The security flaw was identified by Mark Brand of Google Project Zero, and per Google's policy, no bug bounty reward will be handed out for this specific vulnerability. Chrome 103 resolves 3 other use after free vulnerabilities found by external researchers impacting components such as interest groups, web app provider, and cast UI and toolbar. The latest Chrome update also resolved an externally reported high severity type confusion flaw in the V8 JavaScript and WebAssembly engine, along with 4 other medium and low severity issues. Google says it paid out $44,000 in bug bounty rewards to the reporting researchers, but there's no mention if there's any active attacks exploiting these. The latest version of the Chrome release is 103.0.5060.53. Make sure you get those taken care of. NSA yesterday with a very interesting announcement sharing tips on how to secure Windows devices with PowerShell. So the NSA and cybersecurity partner agencies issued an advisory recommending system admins to use PowerShell to prevent and detect malicious activities on Windows machines. PowerShell is frequently used in cyber attacks. In fact, for anyone with any sort of like EDR tool, MDR, XDR, whatever tool you're using, typically PowerShell is a trigger for an alert. So it's been leveraged mostly in the post-exploitation stage, but the security capabilities embedded in Microsoft's automation and configuration tool can also benefit defenders in their forensic efforts, improve incident response, and automate repetitive tasks. The NSA, along with CISA, the New Zealand NCSC, the UK NCSC, have created a set of recommendations for using PowerShell to mitigate cyber threats instead of removing or disabling it, which would lower defensive capabilities. There's a lower risk of abuse, so reducing the risk of threat actors abusing PowerShell require leveraging capabilities in the framework such as PowerShell remoting, which does not expose plain text credentials when executing commands remotely on Windows hosts. Administrators should be aware that enabling this feature on private networks automatically adds a new rule in Windows Firewall that permits all connections. Customizing Windows Firewall to allow connections only from trusted endpoints and networks helps reduce an attacker's chance for successful lateral movements. There's multiple recommendations on the sheet that came through from the NSA. Definitely worth a look, and it's linked in the show notes and on our website at cyberhubpodcast.com. Yesterday, tech executives were urging government to share cyber threat intel. And a friend of the show's, the chief security officer over at MasterCard, Mr. Ron Green, went on to testify, and this is really a lot of his testimony here, talking about how the sharing of threat intel with the private sector can both mitigate cybersecurity risks and help reduce cyber crime. Ron Green said that our digital world is too interconnected and threats are too fast changing for any one organization to counter them alone. Green, who was joined by 3 other tech leaders, made his remarks during a House Homeland Security subpanel that touched on the intersection of emerging technologies and security risks. Robert Knack, a U.S. official at the White House Office of National Cyber Director, told lawmakers in April that companies are increasingly asking government to share threat intel as they seek to prepare and counter growing security threats. Obviously, that's extremely, extremely helpful. And what Ron Green says here is definitely to the point. If they share more threat intel with us, then that helps us all do our jobs, and it creates more transparency. We're able to reduce risk and handle it properly. And the reason we do that is because when you're dealing with nation states, the fact that you're not getting threat intel, the fact that you're expected to stand alone against nation states is very, very difficult, and it seems overwhelming. Russia, for example, has been spying and targeting 42 Ukrainian allies. This is coinciding with the unrelenting cyber attacks against Ukraine. State-backed Russian hackers have engaged in strategic espionage against government, think tanks, businesses, and aid groups in 42 countries supporting Kiev, according to Microsoft. Since the start of the war, Russia has been targeting and has been successful 29% of the time, according to Microsoft. As a coalition of countries have come together to defend Ukraine, Russian intel agencies have stepped up network penetration, espionage activities targeting allied governments outside of the Ukraine. Nearly 2/3 of the cyber espionage targets involve NATO members. The United States was the prime target, so was Poland, the main conduit flowing to the Ukraine. Denmark, Norway, Finland, Sweden, and Turkey have all seen also more attacks. The exception was Estonia, where there was nothing there. That's because Estonia is attributed to having cloud computing, where it's easier to detect intruders, and they have significant collective defenses that other nations have as a weakness. Half of the 128 organizations targeted are government agencies, 12% are NGOs, typically think tanks or humanitarian groups, according to the 28-page report from Microsoft. And, this threat intel comes in really handy for a lot of us, not to mention China, who are now hacking SMS bomber tools with malware hidden inside. The threat cluster, with ties to the hacking group called Tropic Trooper, has been spotted using a previously undocumented malware code in NIM language to strike targets as part of a newly discovered campaign. The novel loader, dubbed Nemoda, is bundled with Chinese language grayware SMS bomber tool that is most likely illegally distributed in the Chinese-speaking web. Whoever crafted the NIM loader took special care to give it the same executable icon as the SMS bomber that it drops and executes. Therefore, the entire bundle works as a Trojanized binary. SMS bomber, as the name indicates, allows the user to input a phone number, not their own, as to flood the victim's device with messages and potentially render it unusable in what's a denial of service attack on the device itself. Tropic Trooper is also known by the monikers Earth Centaur, Keyboy, and Pirate Panda, has a track record of striking targets located in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the Philippines, primarily focusing on government, healthcare, transportation, and high-tech industries. What's very interesting about this one to me specifically is not just the fact that they're doing this, but where they're doing it. They're doing it in Taiwan. There's rumors that China is looking to invade Taiwan. We know that before Russia invaded Ukraine, they launched a slew of cyber attacks. So imagine them dropping an SMS bomber on every single phone in the island of Taiwan, then launching a military counteroffensive into Taiwan, thus eliminating, essentially flooding the phone system so that no one can call for help, notify, or use social media, rendering their phones pretty much useless. A massive DDoS attack in a scale on mobile devices we've never seen before. Wouldn't surprise me coming from the Chinese folks. And that's something to keep in mind. Again, we see how the evolution of cyber continues to go. And with nation states, what Ron Green talked about yesterday in front of the House Homeland Security subcommittee would be just as important. The sharing of threat intel, the ability for us to get information from our government partners like they expect to get from us information, is a two-way streak, and it'd be extremely helpful for all of us as we try to defend our organizations and keep them not only safe, but keep us operational and ensure that our IP is protected and so much more. That's it for our show today. We'll be back tomorrow with Cyber Trivia Friday. We're going to be talking about cyber certs. So we're going to be asking certification questions in trivia. It's going to be really, really awesome. You will join us tomorrow. Until then, have a great rest of your day. And most importantly, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.